Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Steven Chikumba. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hi everyone, Lisette here, she, her, ella. The mission of the Parent Advocate Podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC trans kids.
Lisette, we've got Kansas taking away trans people's driver's licenses, Trump attacking trans people during the State of the Union, and we have a study of over 3,000 transgender athletes, which proves definitively that trans athletes have no physical advantages over their cisgender counterparts.
Wait, Steven, can you say that part again?
We have a study which proves definitively that transgender athletes have no physical advantages over their cisgender counterparts.
Exactly. I don't even have anything to add to that.
So what are we waiting for? Welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. So Lisette, I have so much to say, but tell me what's been going on with you first.
Okay, Steven, remember when we were recording last weekend?
Yes.
And I was like, can you hear all that firework happening outside? And you're
Yes.
like, no. It was a beautiful show that we missed, all in the joys of recording our podcast. But when I saw the videos, I was like, oh my God, this is magic. How did we miss this incredible firework flying bird show? I'm going to have to send you the video of it. But we missed it. Daniel was like, wow, that looked insane. So what's happening in Valencia right now is that Fallas has kicked off. So last weekend was the kickoff weekend. I don't know what it's really about, Steven. It started off, I don't know how many decades ago, about like a surplus of wood. And so they started building these statues, and then at the end of March, they burned them down. But they celebrate for like a whole month around these big statues that they're all some sort of critique, social critique. It's fireworks, it's all the things for a month. We went to go see the museum where they house all what they call ninots, which are these like large, wooden things that they're going to burn at the end of the month. There were so many about Trump. There was one of just like an enraged person wearing a t-shirt that says fuck Trump. There was Trump sitting on a toilet dressed like a king. It's really interesting to see the commentary from across the world about how they're feeling. What else is new? It was a hard week talking to people back home. Everyone's feeling it, especially after what happened in Kansas. Legislative session is just plowing through, and I think making people feel like, what's the point of everything? I'm trying to be supportive and helpful where I can be, because when I feel hopeless, I find that helping makes me feel better in helping, right? In doing, in being a part of it in some supportive way. That's about it.
All right, I got a couple things for you. Number one, there's always fireworks in Spain. Like, do you know how many times we have gotten on and you were like, can you hear that? There's fireworks. Can you hear that? There's fireworks. Do these people do nothing else but set off friggin' fireworks? That's the first thing. The second thing is I love the way people in other countries lampoon Trump. I have seen so many balloons and statues and now apparently figurines made of wood that are suggesting that people don't really like him outside of America. People don't like him in America, but it warms the cockles of my heart to know that people create effigies of this fool that they can clown and make fun of and basically use as satire for commentary on our diaper-wearing, cathetered, flatulent, saliva-dripping, incontinent president. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. And yes, we are very much feeling it here in America with this constant onslaught of fuckery coming at us from all quarters. It's freaking insane. So I just had to say all those things in response because that's a lot. That's a lot to deal with. And I hope that helping other people is helping you because people definitely need it. The timing right now is such that wherever you can help out, you should help out because ultimately that's what mutual aid looks like. That's what supporting one another looks like. That's what community looks like. In times of crisis, we wrap our arms around each other. We reach out to each other. We make sure that other people are feeling good. And sometimes doing something is much better than being left alone in our thoughts and doing nothing. So
Yeah.
good on you.
I got a call from a mom yesterday, and she was like so angry because I told you that they're trying to put an ICE detention center in one of our neighborhoods, like in Marana, one of the boroughs. And what's really fascinating is that they had sold the prison to the state years ago for like 150,000, right? And then the state closed down the prison. It's just been sitting there empty for 2 years. They bought it back for 15 million in April. And so she's like, they knew that they were going to turn a profit. And so I had to send her this quote by James Baldwin that says, hope is invented every day. And so I just have to think that we give each other hope when we show up with good intentions and with care, you know? But tell me,
Yes.
what's your week been like?
My week has been very busy, like busy with work, busy with planning for South by Southwest, busy with the kids, busy supporting families through all the fuckery. It's just been busy. I'm surprised at the end of every week that another week has passed. And in less than 2 weeks, I'll be at South by Southwest. And the amount of activity that's going around, the number of press requests and interviews and reviews, the amount of additional requests to screen the movie, invitations to other film festivals, it's just like a whirlwind of activity. And it's work. It seems glamorous, but it's not. It's work. One exciting piece, though, of all this work is Dwayne Wade has confirmed that he will be at the premiere doing the little press junket with us, the red carpet and the Getty photo shoots and all the things. So that's very exciting. I'm excited for our dads who are going to be in proximity to all of this, because it's one thing to hear me talk about it. It's one thing to see like the film crew at the retreats and to sit down for an interview. It's an entirely different thing to see the finished piece and then to see all of the fanfare around it. So I'm really, really excited for them to be able to see the fruits of our collective labor come to fruition.
Yeah, I really want to see it. I'm so jealous.
So wait, have you not talked to Lucina yet? Have you not
I haven't
talked to your
asked her.
girl?
No, I'm
That's
waiting.
good. No, that's good. I think you should wait. I think you should wait till it comes to a theater near you so you can get that full vicarious experience. It's not the same thing when you're looking at a screen, even if it's a 65 or 70 inch, it's a whole different experience when you're sitting in a dark theater and it comes on for the first time and you see my head 20 feet high staring at you. But Lisette, we could talk about how busy our weeks have been, but how about we get into today's topics?
Oh, let's do it. I'm dreading it.
Lisette, I know you've been following this as I've been, but to bring our listeners up to speed, last week, Thursday, the state of Kansas invalidated the driver's licenses of transgender residents and required them to renew their birth certificates with the original sex assignment at birth. And so overnight, without notice, without regard to the difficulty it was going to place on all of these transgender people, the state unilaterally decided that they were going to revoke their licenses and require them to get new ones, creating what can only be described as chaos and serious harm for transgender people as a result.
Not only that, but the fact that they were able to send letters so quickly to their homes means that they have a list compiled of all transgender people living within their state, which is even more terrifying.
I don't know how anyone can hear what we've just shared, know that we're not being hyperbolic, know that the state has targeted a specific group of people for differential treatment and be okay with that. Like the part that really just boggles my mind is that for 16 years in Kansas, transgender people have been able to get licenses and update their birth certificates with gender markers that reflect their lived realities. For 16 years, it has not been a problem. It wasn't until 2023 that Kansas decided to follow the red wave of manic behavior around transgender people and tried to stop it. And last year, the court said, no, you can't do that. We're going to allow transgender people to continue to get licenses that reflect their lived reality, continue to change their gender markers on their birth certificates. And the Kansas legislature passed a law, the governor vetoed it, and because they have a supermajority, overrode her veto. And so a law that allowed people to get their gender markers changed and allowed them to live as full people in the state for 16 years was overturned, not because the people in Kansas thought there was something wrong with it, but because this uber conservative legislature in the state of Kansas decided that it's too much for this 1,000 residents in Kansas to have gender markers that reflect their lived realities in our state. Absolutely not.
It's a lot to process. I think people who are outside, who see themselves outside of policy or may not really understand how policy works, invalidating someone's identity document is essentially telling them that they are no longer protected and or I don't want to use the word seen because the word seen feels like, oh, you don't see me. But like literally like they are no longer a protected class of people. This changes whether they'll have the ability to vote. I mean, they couldn't even drive to the DMV to surrender because the word that was used was surrender their driver's license. And so it goes to show people that policy is deeply personal. And what they do to trans people, they're going to do to other people. And it's what they do to undocumented and immigrant people all the time, right? And so I think this should scare everyone.
Once again, most people are unaware of the historical roots of laws like the one in Kansas, which says you do not exist except on our terms. That's all it is. It's hearkening back to days where you literally had to have papers to travel around. And what's happening in Kansas is inextricably intertwined with what's happening with immigration in this country. It's inextricably intertwined with the state of passports in this country. There's so many ways in which what is happening in Kansas is a microcosm with what's happening in larger society, and people don't seem to be disturbed by it at all. That's concerning to me. The fact that you can allow your fellow citizens, your neighbors, the people that you work with to suffer these really draconian, unnecessary slights for no good purpose. There was nothing about transgender people's licenses and birth certificates in the state of Kansas that warranted the revocation of their licenses and the mandatory changing of gender markers on their birth certificates. Like literally, it is punitive activity only. It is only intended to harm a specific group of people. I cannot express to you how upsetting this is. Not to me per se. I don't know anybody in Kansas, quite frankly, but the fact of the matter is there are residents in Kansas who are suffering as a result of this. And if you do not feel for those people, there is something wrong with you. It doesn't matter what political stripe you affiliate with. If you do not see the state causing harm to the least of us for no good reason as a thing to be offended by, to be concerned by, then there is legitimately something wrong with you.
What's good is that ACLU has already stated that they will be suing and it'll go to the courts all over again. Well, Stephen, in keeping with the theme of the state targeting trans people, President Trump targeted trans minors and gender-affirming care during his State of the Union address last week. Donald Trump cited the case of Virginia teenager Sage Blair to argue that schools affirming trans youth pose a danger. The anecdote was strategically presented to lead the audience to a distinct conclusion, that a child's social transition at school without parental knowledge participates in a series of disastrous outcomes, including running away, trafficking, and assault, thereby necessitating a halt to affirming trans children. Instead of talking about the things Americans really care about, Donald Trump threw more red meat at his base and distracted us once again from all of the fucked up shit that's happening under this administration.
I don't know about you, but I didn't watch the State of the Union. I never watch the State of the Union, especially if it involves this piece of shit. But I can tell you that when I heard that he had raised the story of Sage Blair as a cautionary tale for schools not supporting and not affirming their gender expansive students, I was legitimately pissed off because A, this child has been traumatized, period, full stop. This is an adopted child raised by a person who obviously has alt-right Christian beliefs, so they could not come out to their parents at home, felt safe coming out at school, was bullied and harassed at school, but still supported by the school, found out by her adoptive parents that they were identifying differently at school, and then became the subject of a lawsuit, forced to detransition, was unhappy that they were outed by their parents, and so they ran away. When they ran away, they were trafficked, as often is the case with LGBTQ plus youth who are not supported by their families. So instead of this being a story about what happens when you don't affirm your child, it ended up being a story about what happens when your child finds support at school and that school doesn't share that information with your parents, because that's what happened. That child felt safe at school and shared their identity with people they felt safe with at school. The person that they didn't share it with weaponized that information against them. And now the president is using the example of what happened to this poor child as an example of schools affirming children and how that can go awry. It's so infuriating the way people twist and turn detransitioners and or people who decide, not because they don't believe that they are the gender identity that they share, but because the world makes it too difficult for them to continue to present as they see themselves, as they are, as they want to be seen by the rest of the world. And so they shrink themselves to avoid parental harassment or castigation or expulsion or criticism or harm. But it's not that that person wants to not be their true selves. It's just too difficult. That is why you have suicidal ideation and self-harm, because the world doesn't accept who they are, not because they are who they are. It's because the world doesn't accept them as they are. Oh, I was so pissed off.
I too didn't watch it in real time. I was like, I'm going to sleep. I'm not going to stay up till 3 a.m. and wait for this awful human being to speak. But when I caught up on the clips the next day, it just felt like a circus. And I think not only does it frame incorrectly what support at school or lack of support in the home can cause trans youth to go through, but I think it showed the fact that this administration, again, is using trans youth as political pawns to influence elections. And I hope at some point people will finally recognize that this is really a distraction from the things that really are having material impacts on their day-to-day lives and, economies.
What's the most ironic thing about Trump holding up this child's story as an example, as a cautionary tale for parents, is that he is a 34 count convicted felon. He is a now known rapist. He is a known pedophile. He is known to have trafficked young girls and women. He is known to have affiliated himself with some of the worst molesters, pedophiles, and rapists that we've ever seen. This man is the one we're going to be listening to about protecting our children. This man, and no one sees the irony and the contradiction of it all. It's amazing to me that this man is not in handcuffs, president or no. He is a criminal. He is part of a criminal conspiracy involving the trafficking of children that goes back for decades and involves people at the highest echelons of society. And instead of paying attention to that, people want to talk about protecting women and girls from trans people. It would be laughable if it weren't fucking true. It would be laughable if this wasn't actually happening. And I just don't understand how people can form their lips to say anything about trans people and the people that support them when there are literal pedophiles in our government harming women and children in real time, as evidenced by 3 million documents that the DOJ, who should be protecting our citizens, is protecting this pedophile and his cronies. It is literally the type of thing that makes my blood boil.
The cognitive dissonance makes my head hurt.
I mean, fuck cognitive dissonance. It is pure, unadulterated hypocrisy. It is willful ignorance of the highest order, because there's no way with this amount of information that you now have at your disposal about what's been happening that you can sit here and say anything to me about trans people while saying nothing about this fucking pedophile. For years, they were talking about Democrats eating babies in the bottom of a pizza parlor in DC. And now when you are confronted with actual evidence of these heathen engaged in like literal, we talked about it, literal consumption of human flesh, talking about passing around beef jerky and making beef jerky and eating, you're going to bring, like, these motherfuckers are not even shy about it. And you are going to talk to me about trans people? You better get the fuck out my face. But in some news that we knew, that we've been known, that we've been trying to share with people forever, a new study from the British Journal of Sports Medicine analyzing data from more than 3,000 trans women has reaffirmed that trans women possess no physical advantage over cisgender athletes. The study by Brazilian researchers of 52 previous studies compared the physical performance of over 2,900 trans women and 2,300 trans men with 560 plus cis women and 660 plus cis men. And the review showed that trans women who've undergone at least a year of hormone therapy generally perform similarly to their cisgender women in strength, endurance, and other key physical fitness measures, undermining the idea that trans women inherently dominate in sports. The researchers found no meaningful athletic advantage after transition, even if lean body mass remained a bit higher in some cases. So when all these politicians are talking about blanket trans or prohibitions on trans women in sports, the research shows that these policy positions aren't rooted in evidence. Period.
That's right, Stephen. They're just rooted in discrimination. And again, they always talk about and reduce trans people to bodies because it allows them to dehumanize trans people and allows them to use bigoted tropes in order to get their message across.
I remember the first time I had a conversation with Hobbs's pediatrician about it because I was just curious. This was very early days for me in terms of like knowing anything about trans people, trans women and girls specifically. And so I just asked him, I was like, people are saying that trans women have physical advantages over cisgender women when it comes to athletics. And, you know, you're a doctor, you do this for a living. I don't. And he was like, well, first, I'm not a doctor that works with athletes. So I can't tell you about how athletic performance is or isn't enhanced by hormone therapy. But what I can tell you is that as a result of taking hormones, trans women lose body mass, muscle tone, like all of these things because the physiological effects of it makes their bodies more like their cisgender counterparts and less like they were physiologically originally. And so there is something to be said about loss of physical performance because of it. That was just, that was 6 or 7 years ago. And today we are seeing that 52 studies, this is not some de minimis amount of research that's been done, 52 studies encompassing almost 6,000 transgender athletes, male and female, has determined with scientific certainty that there is no advantage that remains after 1 year of hormone therapy. And as we know, it's not like they just do it for a year so they can complete and they stop. It is something that transgender people who want to live their lives as full and complete people may continue to receive hormone therapies, and most of the governing bodies in athletics require adherence to these very strict standards. And so people need to stop talking about physical advantage as if it's conferred simply because of your genetic makeup at birth. Athletes train, period. And so for those who are performing at any kind of high level, elite athletes, etc., it's not because of some inherent physical advantage. It's because they train, just like cisgender athletes train. And if they train, they perform well. And so the fact that people stop accounting for training when they're looking at trans athletes and simply go to physical makeup is infuriating. And I'm happy that this very large study of 52 studies has reaffirmed what we've always known to be the case.
I had a really good friend remind me that what leads to athletic success is a well-funded program and excellent coaching, right? I think it's really, really important for people to realize that there's so much more that goes into athletics at a school level. And not only that, but like most states had requirements that transgender people had to go through before being allowed to join a team. In Arizona, we have the Arizona Interscholastic Association, and for 12 years, they had a policy that was invasive when you read it, that trans youth had to go through in order to prove whether they could play or not. And in those 12 years, I think they only allowed like 2 people to participate in sports. And so, really, when you're talking about trans youth in sports, you're talking about like elementary, junior high. And then when they hit the high school level, it requires a whole other rigorous process to be able to participate. It's an exhausting conversation to have with people who really are just spoon fed misinformation and wholeheartedly believe that what they're saying is fact.
It is so annoying having these conversations over and over and over and over and over again, as if we're dealing with a deluge of transgender athletes flooding all the sports. For at least a decade, the International Olympic Committee has had rules regarding trans participation in sports. USA Swimming had rules regarding trans participation in sports. The Powerlifting Association had rules about trans participation in sports. Like, so many of these governing bodies had rules in place that trans athletes were following without issue. It wasn't until it became this massive culture war issue that people started talking about it. And it's like you said, there are large bodies for whom they polled, they did research and said, hey, this one is going to stick. This is where we can make our bones. This is where we can get people outraged enough and where people don't know enough. And if you say the thing enough times, people are going to believe it. I was listening to a podcast where they were talking about a study that was done about people who watch social media. And they were talking about Facebook in particular. Facebook had the For You component of the algorithm versus the people that you follow. And so they chose what they were going to deliver on those For You pages. 25% of that content was like far right content. And then they polled the people about their sentiments after a period of time. And they found that people who had watched the For You page had far right leanings after it. And that even after they stopped defaulting to that For You page, their sentiments remained far right, even though they were no longer being served that content, which means that these algorithms, which push and peddle disinformation and misinformation, change the way people think about things. And so the right has been pushing and peddling disinformation and misinformation long enough that it has become part of the psyche of the public, even though it's not true. And even when they're presented with the truth, they are no longer capable of discerning what's true from what's untrue, and they continue to persist with these untrue beliefs. And this is where we are right now. Having been fed this diet of disinformation and misinformation for so long, those of us who are truly susceptible to this type of bullshit fall for it hook, line, and sinker and are irretrievably lost. And I think that's where we are today, that there are certain people who are just so down the rabbit hole that they're irretrievably lost, and we've got to leave them there because there's no reaching them. And we have to focus on people who don't go down the rabbit hole and who are capable of being moved, that movable middle, because
Or rehabilitated.
if that's possible. Now it's time for a recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals and groups who are supporting the LGBTQIA community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Well, Stephen, our ally of the week is Brandi Carlile. This week's ally, Brandi Carlile, turned her Minneapolis concert into a massive benefit that raised over $600,000 for families hurt by aggressive ICE operations and the fallout from the Trump administration's immigration policies. Carlile used her platform not just to perform, but to bring people together and support the advocates for human rights in providing real legal help and resources where they're desperately needed. Carlile demonstrated the kind of leadership that shows up with heart and action, and that's exactly what our communities need right now.
I'm not even going to lie. I thought this was Belinda Carlisle, and I didn't realize that there was another person named Brandi Carlile. And I was like, I love me some Belinda Carlisle. And I was looking up her music. I was like, wait, Brandi Carlile? This ain't Belinda Carlisle. This is a whole different person. And so I was just like, all right, now I got to look up this Brandi Carlile because this person is the bomb for doing this. And it's in the same vein of one of our previous allies of the week, Bruce Springsteen, who is going to these places and supporting these communities who need their support after being ravaged by this administration's dogs coming into their city and terrorizing its citizens. I love the fact that people like her are using her platform to raise money for the people that have been impacted by these policies and by the behavior of this administration in ways that are tangible and real. And so I just love it. And didn't know she's like a multi-Grammy award winning artist. Like, you better work, Brandi Carlile, not Belinda Carlisle.
And this is why, Stephen, Brandi Carlile is our ally of the week.
Congratulations to Brandi Carlile. And now on to our asshole of the week. Our asshole of the week this week goes to actor Dennis Quaid. The Substance actor Dennis Quaid went out of his way to praise Donald Trump as genuine and very funny, framing him as some sort of misunderstood truth teller, all while ignoring the very real harm Trump's policies and rhetoric have inflicted on transgender children and their families. I don't particularly care who any celebrity votes for, but when you use your platform to sanitize and normalize leadership that is actively targeting our children, that is not harmless opinion, that is complicity. And I find it truly disturbing that in light of the recent dump of Epstein files, which shows that Trump is a racist, a pedophile, and an absolute scumbag, that this is when he decides he wants to gush over Trump.
Well, Stephen, let's not forget that he went on another talk show a few years back and said, he may be an asshole, but he's my asshole. And so he's just standing 10 toes down. And honestly, it just ruined some of my most favorite childhood movies.
Like, I could give a fuck about Dennis Quaid right now. Honestly, it's like, I don't care for anyone who is going to stand beside this absolute piece of shit and normalize or sanitize the thing that he's been doing. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you've done. I don't care how many awards you received. I don't care what your past looks like. If it now consists of support for this particular piece of shit, because this particular piece of shit is making real people's lives miserable. He is dragging our country down into the gutter, and he is doing everything in his power to aggrandize wealth for himself, his family, his cronies at the expense of everyday people. I did not pay my taxes to go into his fucking pockets, period. So, Mr. Quaid and all of your ilk, you can take Donald Trump's cathetered, diapered, defecating, incontinent ass and shove him all the way up your bum.
It's also just so shocking how people are showing who they truly are, showing their true colors. And so keep showing that ass, because now we're going to remember you. Time will not forget and or forgive.
Lisa, you said something truly powerful. I am not surprised anymore when people show their true colors, because as I've said in the past, when people show you who they are, believe them and keep receipts, because motherfuckers are going to have some revisionist history after this motherfucker is gone. And I'm like, no, you don't. And this is why Dennis Quaid is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I got to give it up to my amazing co-host and fellow truth teller, Lisette Trujillo, for keeping it 100 every single episode.
And Stephen, you know I couldn't do this without you. So thank you for all of the work that you do to make this podcast happen, and for all the work you're doing with the Dads Foundation. And of course, we couldn't do this without you, our listeners. So thank you for tuning in to the Parent Advocate Podcast.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast, YouTube, and Substacks. Follow us on Instagram and my TikTok, and do everything you got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast. Goodbye.
Bye.